Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker, shells, dead slicers, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And we're heading back to Iraq. And the question has to be asked, why did the Iraqi army fail in the field? Utterly crushed. Particularly staggering when you consider the odds. I know a lot of the numbers that have been floating around, including in my videos, have been uh, fluctuating and quite different from different sources. The latest source has the CIA estimate for ISIS at somewhere around 5,000 fighters. Of course, the CIA is probably inflating those numbers in order to make it look like it's a bigger force than it is. And also one has to ask if that's pre or post all these prisoners being freed. And supposedly the Mosul garrison, previously I had heard there was anywhere from 10 to 30,000 Iraqi army there. Now this source says 52,000, which makes this defeat in the field all the more staggering. And not only that, when we have 4 of Iraq's 14 divisions fled, so a third of their army, roughly a third or a fourth of their army fled in the field, and not only fled but left their uniforms and their equipment behind. And so now we have the ISIS militants, of course, with plethora of new weapons and armament and vehicles. And the divisions that were collapsed were mixed Sunni, Shia, and Kurd. And that's held up as one of the reasons why these units crumbled. And there's some credibility to that, because when you have a Shia command and with all these mixed divisions, the hierarchy, it's going to be broken, I'm sure. And Maliki's aware of that, because he's keeping all the mostly Shia units closer to Baghdad, and that's the people he can trust. And in fact, Maliki has kept the officer corps predominantly Shia, especially after the U.S. left. And that's one of the problems that we have. And that will appear again later in this video, speaking of the Sunni officer corps of the Iraqi army. So we have the Iraqi military with poor leadership, declining morale, broken equipment, declining training, and limited air power. And that those are essentially the highlights as to why they were defeated so rapidly in the field. But another part of that quotient is we have to remember that the war for the Iraqi army has been going on for quite some time, the better part of several months. And in fact, since January, 6 helicopters have been shot down, 60 damaged in battle, 28 M1 tanks damaged, 5 tanks were even full armor penetration. So that means these ISIS have sophisticated anti-tank weaponry. And then most of their other tanks are having maintenance issues. And then we also have the fact that training and all the academies that the United States military built for the Iraqis pretty much went unused after the U.S. left. So there's no longer a sophisticated system to build a fighting force. And so all that went to the wayside. And so this war of attrition on the Iraqi army is finally paying off with a new front opened by ISIS in the north. And this U.S. has spent $25 billion to train and equip the Iraqi security forces and provide these installations up until September 2012. And all it took is these last several years for the forces to fall into dilapidation. But it's more complex than that, because of course at the core of the problem with the Iraqi army is one of the biggest mistakes the United States made during the Iraqi occupation. And that was the mass disbanding of some 300,000 Iraqi soldiers under the leadership of Bremer. And I can understand the reasoning behind that in some sense, because if you left the military intact, they would perhaps be a force to take over the government when the United States left. But if we'd known we were going to be there for 10 years, it would have been a much better strategy to keep the entire Iraqi army whole as it was then. All the units were intact. There was unit pride. There was pride in the military. It could have gone a long way in keeping stability in that country when they needed it most. And the mass laying off of 300,000 military-trained, armed men into the unemployment rolls in the middle of a sectarian civil war was a stroke of ignorance. So anyway, I think where the Iraqi army finds itself now has a lot to do with that fatal mistake. And as far as mentioning how long this war has been going on in Iraq, this has been going on for months and months and months. It includes all these suicide bombings and assassinations. And in fact, the scale is massive. 10,000 people were killed in Iraq in 2013, and we're on pace right now to beat that in 2014. So this is another war that, for some reason, slips under the radar. Western media and U.S. government has tried to play down events in Iraq so as not to be embarrassed by this potential massive failure, and now very self-evident massive failure. But there's actually another ingredient to this that's pretty interesting. And that is the fact that there's almost an attempted coup going on within this jihadi onslaught. And that's the fact that we have a lot of collaborators for the Sunni insurgency. And the Sunni insurgency is being organized by more than 40 military officers who had served in Saddam Hussein's army. And they've been conspiring with these attackers. And they're the Baathists and the Sunnis. And theoretically, they've been able to convince a lot of these units to give up in the field. And at least that's what some of these reports are suggesting. So in a lot of ways, that would suggest an attempted coup, having 40 military officers, particularly as I guess there's some allegiance to the former vice president under Saddam Hussein. And this is also one reason why they've had to raise a popular army, because in Baghdad they can't even depend on the regular army, and there's a lot of Sunnis still within the ranks, and they have to be fearful of this because the same kind of dynamics that are playing out all over Iraq and Syria, for that matter, could play out within Baghdad with the right spark. But so anyway, back to this, the idea that these mutinous officers called on these units to retreat and are collaborating with ISIS, and there seems to be some substance to that, as we have some people that have left Mosul who are saying that they would actually rather live under the insurgency, the rising insurgency, than the Maliki government. But Mosul's always been a hotbed of resistance, Sunni resistance, as has a lot of these other cities that are falling. So it's going to be a lot tougher when we get to the Shia heartland. And I want to finish with one last thing that's pretty interesting that doesn't bode well, and that's the fact that apparently soldiers that are showing up for service in Baghdad are wearing their civilian clothes underneath their uniforms, just in case they have to take flight. So anyway, there's a glimpse as to why the Iraqi military is where it is, and will probably not perform much better in the field. And there will have to be some outside help if they are to survive. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.